Today, we are going to unpack a story that is absolutely massive, one that stretches across centuries. It's the story of the rise and the fall of British India. We're talking about a tale that starts with merchants just looking to make a profit and somehow ends with the creation of two entirely new nations. It's a wild ride of commerce, conquest, rebellion, and revolution. So let's dive right in.
So, right off the bat, here's the big question, the one that's almost hard to believe. How on earth does a private company, not a government, not an army, but a business, end up ruling an entire subcontinent? It's kind of mind-boggling when you think about it. And then, just as important, what happened? How did this powerful empire, the British Raj, finally come to an end? Let's get into it.
Okay, so let's set the scene. We're in the 18th century. The once unstoppable Mughal Empire, which had ruled for centuries, is starting to crumble. It's fragmenting, creating this huge power vacuum. And all this chaos? Well, it was the perfect opening for European trading companies. They'd been hanging around the coasts for a while, but now they saw a chance to go from just running trading posts to actually grabbing territory and power. Now, what's really key to understand in what happens next is the huge difference between the two main rivals on the scene, the English and the French. Think of it like this. The English East India Company was like a nimble, aggressive startup. It was a private business, run by a board, and all about making quick decisions to get ahead. The French company, on the other hand, was state-controlled. It was bogged down in bureaucracy, slow and clunky. That difference in speed and agility, it ended up being a total game-changer in conflicts like the Carnatic Wars.
So, the English success really came down to this powerful three-part formula. First, they had the Royal Navy, the most dominant naval force on the planet, basically giving them control of the seas. Second, the Industrial Revolution was kicking off back home, giving them a massive economic and technological advantage. And third, and this is so crucial, they became absolute masters of divide and rule. They expertly exploited the rivalries between local Indian rulers, playing them against each other, a strategy that led to decisive victories like the Battle of Plassey in 1757.
But you can't just expand your power that quickly without some serious consequences. By the middle of the 19th century, the company was pretty much in total control. But underneath the surface, anger was just simmering everywhere. And then, in 1857, all that simmering discontent just exploded. A massive rebellion erupted, one that shook the British Empire to its very core and would change the course of Indian history for good. And, this revolt wasn't about just one thing. It was a perfect storm. Economically, local industries were destroyed, and people were being crushed by taxes. Politically, Indian rulers were losing their kingdoms to sneaky annexation policies. And inside the company's own army, the Indian soldiers, the sepoys, felt their culture and religious beliefs were being completely disrespected. The final straw, those infamous rifle cartridges greased with animal fat, was really just the spark that lit a century's worth of fuel.
And this quote right here points to something that's incredibly important and often overlooked. The 1857 uprising saw this amazing sense of unity between Hindus and Muslims. They weren't fighting each other, they saw a common enemy in the British, and they rallied around a single symbol, the last Mughal emperor, who became the figurehead for the entire rebellion.
Now, the British did eventually manage to crush the revolt, but it terrified them. The sheer scale of it was a massive wake-up call. They realized that a trading company just couldn't govern an empire this fast. So in 1858, they did something huge. They dissolved the East India Company. Power was transferred directly to the British Crown. And just like that, the era of company rule was over. The age of the British Raj had begun. This shift to direct rule by the British government changed everything. The old system was gone, and in its place, a new, Western-educated Indian middle class started to grow. This kicked off this incredible intellectual awakening, which would lay the foundation for a modern, united Indian nationalist movement. What's so fascinating is that before they could really demand political change from the British, many Indian thinkers felt they had to reform their own society first. You had these powerful movements that challenged old customs like the caste system and pushed forward things like women's rights and modern education. They were essentially building a new, modern Indian identity from the inside out.
All this new thinking led to the creation of the Indian National Congress in 1885. And you can just watch how their demands grow bolder over time. At first, you have the moderates, who are politely asking for a few reforms, maybe a little more say in the government. Then come the extremists, who are pushing for boycotts and self-reliance. And finally, the goal becomes crystal clear. No more compromises. Purna Swaraj, complete independence. But for all its passion, the independence struggle was still mostly a thing for the educated elite. That is, until one man showed up, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. When he returned from South Africa in 1915, he completely changed the game. He was the one who took the movement out of the meeting halls and brought it to the streets, to the villages, to millions of ordinary people.
Gandhi's secret weapon was an idea called satyagraha. Now, don't mistake this for being passive. It was anything but. It was an active, powerful, and totally nonviolent refusal to cooperate with laws you knew were unjust. It was this brilliant moral and political strategy that gave millions of everyday Indians a way to challenge the most powerful empire on earth without ever picking up a weapon. And he unleashed this weapon in a series of massive, countrywide campaigns, each one turning up the pressure. You had the non-cooperation movement in the 1920s, which aimed to just grind the British administration to a halt. Then the civil disobedience movement in the 1930s, kicking off with that iconic salt march to openly break British laws. And finally, in 1942, the message was simple and blunt, the Quit India movement. The time for talk was over, they had to leave.
And if you want to get a sense of the sheer scale of this, just look at that number. By May of 1941, during just one phase of the movement, over 25,000 people willingly got themselves arrested and sent to jail. Think about that. These weren't just protests anymore. This was a nationwide movement built on incredible personal sacrifice.
Then came World War II, and it basically exhausted the British Empire. They were drained of money, resources, and the will to keep holding on to India. The end of the Raj was finally in sight. But this final chapter, well, it would be a moment of both incredible triumph and just profound tragedy.
So the final exit plan was called the Mountbatten Plan. It did grant independence, which was the goal, but it also agreed to the demand for a separate nation, Pakistan. This meant carving up the massive provinces of Punjab and Bengal and, crucially, transferring all power at a truly breakneck speed. I mean, just think about the hope in this pledge from 1930. The dream for decades had been for a single, united, free India. The whole vision was of one secular nation finally breaking free. But the reality of what was about to happen couldn't have been more tragically different.
The insane rush to get out was an absolute catastrophe. There was no time to set anything up. And here's the most shocking part. The new borders, the lines that would divide India and Pakistan, weren't even announced until after Independence Day. This was a deliberate move by the British to basically wash their hands of the consequences. And it directly led to chaos, horrific violence, and one of the largest and most painful mass migrations in all of human history.
And so, on August 15, 1947, the British Raj was over. A struggle that lasted for centuries was finally won. Freedom was achieved. But it came at the terrible, terrible price of partition. It's a legacy that is both triumphant and tragic, and it continues to shape South Asia to this very day. And it just leaves us with that one final haunting question. Freedom was won, yes, but at what cost?